Welcome to the Beginner's Guide to Gear and Element Fission. Gear is one of those systems that is just a very intimidating part of these games, and if you're new to these types of games, it's again very intimidating and very reasonably so. It can take a long time of playing these games to really get a good grasp on understanding gear fully and knowing what a good piece of gear is, and it can be a lot. So, what I want to do is break it all down into its simplest form today to give you a foundation to stand on to begin working toward being able to identify your gear. There's a few ways that you can split it up mentally and a few important key aspects to understand about a piece of gear that will help you do this a little bit easier in time. And again, a lot of it's just going to come with time. So I would encourage you to join some streams, join some communities, and just ask and be involved and ask, and over time it'll start clicking. But again, there's some ways to make it easy on yourself, because if you just open up your gear inventory and start scrolling through it, you're like, how the hell am I supposed to look at all this and know what's going on? So I'm gonna do it in this screen because I like this screen a little better. But before we start getting into mentally separating them and understanding how to categorize them and what you're looking for, let's talk a little bit about the anatomy of a piece of gear, because there's some things that you need to understand. You'll notice you have all these different colors of gear, and you've got your different star ratings of gear. And basically, the star rating in this game dictates how high it can be leveled up. So a 5-star gear can go all the way to 15, whereas a 4-star gear can only go to 12, 3-star to 9, 2-star to 6, so on and so on, right? You will get to a point fairly quickly in the game, even if you're new, where you will pretty much only be working in 4 and 5-star gear. You will fairly quickly want to outgrow all of your 3-star gear. So I'm only going to really be talking about 4 and 5-star gear at this point. Now, the colors of your gear are the rarity. So like this one's a premium, the purple is an expert, the gold is a legendary, and then the yellow is brilliant. I personally don't work with anything under premium. So there are also green and white. I think green is rare and white is common. But I don't really mess with those, so I won't have any of those for examples either. But everything I say will still apply and make sense. So basically, on each piece of gear, you've got a main stat, and then you've got substats that will roll as you level up the gear. And then on some pieces of gear, you'll have something like this. Sometimes it's called a tertiary stat, sometimes it's called an inherent stat. It's just kind of a bonus stat. It's not going to level up as you roll the gear. This stat's not really going to change. The main stat will change, and the substats will go up. When I say change, I mean the value will go up. But this stat's not really going to change much. Okay, so I wouldn't worry too much about it right now. It's just kind of bonus stats for what you're doing. They'll matter more later in a certain way, but much later. So it's not something I would concern yourself with right now. So the rarity dictates how many substats are already going to be present on a piece of gear. So you'll notice every single piece of blue gear that's unleveled will have 2 substats. Every single one of them that you have, regardless of star rating. Every single purple gear that you have that's not leveled will have 3 substats by default. Every single one, every single time. Gold will have 4 if it's unleveled, and yellow will come with the full 5. Every 5-star gear at level 15, regardless of the color, will have 5 substats. So the reason that the rarity matters is because every 3rd level, something's going to change about the substats. They're going to get a roll. So at 3, you would get a roll into an existing substat, or if it was a white piece of gear, you would get a new substat. At green, there would already be a substat present. So at 3, it would get a roll, and then at 6, you would get a new substat. So on these blue pieces of gear, up to level 6, I have the opportunity to roll these 2 substats twice. So what I mean by that is if we roll it to 3, one of these is going to get a roll, and if I roll it to 6, one of them is going to get a roll, okay? So, you know, if I had speed here, for example, more often than not, I would be hoping to double up on a speed roll. Now at 9, I'm going to get a new substat. At 12, I'm going to get a new substat. And at 15, I'm going to get a new substat. And now I have a maxed out rune with all 5 of its substats. So you can see why the higher rarities are more valuable, because they have more potential to stack certain stats more often. So you'll hear people talking about a triple speed or a quad speed or You know, in this game, I guess we could get a 5 speed roll if you're insanely lucky. But it's not always speed that you're looking at looking for. I'm just using that as the example. So again, the purple gear, I have potential here to get a roll into the same 3 stats, or like a 2 and 1. So like we've got 2 crit damage rolls there. So we got 2 crit damage and resistance roll there. Now at 12, I'll get my new substat, and then at 15, I'll get my new substat. All right, so that's basically just kind of the anatomy of a piece of gear. That's why the rarity matters, and that's how the substats work. Every third roll, something's going to hit. If there's not a substat present for that level, it'll add one. If there are already substats present for the level, then they will, you know, get a roll into them, and you could potentially find yourself with a very strong piece of gear. So now that you understand kind of just the basics of looking at your gear and understanding why there's rarities and substats, let's talk a little bit about splitting them up into a way that's maybe a little bit easier to digest. We have 6 slots here, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The first split we're going to do is evens and odds. So your odds, your 1, 3, and 5, will always, 100% of the time, have the same main stat for their slot. So slot 1, for example, every single every single gear that you ever click in slot 1 will always have flat attack here. And flat attack means there's no percentage next to it, basically. So like this is flat attack, this is attack percentage, okay? So slot 1 every single time will have flat attack. Slot 3 every single time will have flat defense. And slot 5 every single time will have flat HP. That will never be different. That will always be the way that works for your gear, okay? Your evens, your 2, 4, and 6, are where you start to get the variables that are possible. So this is where it gets harder to find gear for those slots, right? In 1, 3, 5, you're looking for substats exclusively because the main stat's never going to change. For your 2, 4, 6, you're looking for a main stat that fits and also substats that fit. So it's a lot harder to find spots for 2, 4, 6 or find gear for 2, 4, 6. So as far as what is possible on every one of these gear slots, on all 3 of them, you can have flat HP, flat attack, and flat defense, and you can have HP percentage, attack percentage, and defense percentage. And that's what all 3 slots share in common. And you will pretty much exclusively be looking for percentage stats on those slots instead of the flat stats. The flat stats are there as kind of like a buffer to make it harder to find the gear that you want and probably to give you some gear to sell as you farm to accumulate gold, right? But you will almost never use a flat stat other than speed for a slot 2, 4, 6. And speed will only be in slot 2, and we'll talk about that briefly. You'll almost always be looking for the percentage. Speed's the only flat stat you really want to use in a 2, 4, 6 slot. So they all 3 share those stats in common as possibility. So like if I go to my slot 2 real quick and I start clicking through them, you'll see attack percentage, HP percentage, defense percentage. There's luck rate, which we're going to talk about in a minute, right? But we'll see a lot of different things here. Same with the 4 and 6. They all share those 6 stats in common. Aside from that, each slot has 2 stats that are unique to the slot. So for slot 2, that will be speed. You will only find speed as a main stat in slot 2, and luck rate. You will only find luck rate as a main stat in slot 2. So if I go 4 and 6 and go luck rate, it won't exist. And if I go speed, it won't exist. You'll never find them anywhere but slot 2. And more often than not, as a newer player that's approaching this, you're probably going to want to put speed in your slot 2 on most of your units. And by the time that changes, you will have gathered enough information to have a pretty good understanding of when it should change. But that's a pretty good rule of thumb as a newer player. More often than not, speed's going to go in your slot 2 on everybody you're building. For slot 4, the unique stats are crit rate and crit damage. So you'll only ever find crit rate and crit damage in slot 4 as a main stat. So if I go slot 2 and 6, like I said, they just won't exist. That's exclusive to slot 4. And then for slot 6, it is accuracy and resistance. Those are the 2 unique slots there. So again, they all share the flat HP attack and defense and the percentage attack HP and defense. And then exclusively, slot 2 can only have speed and luck rate, or you'll only find those in slot 2. You'll only find crit rate and crit damage in slot 4, and you'll only find resistance and accuracy in slot 6, okay? So that's a good way to immediately kind of split your gear into halves. And then for your 2, 4, 6, you've kind of got a column for each of those now, so that you understand if you need speed as a main stat, don't drive yourself nuts looking through your 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6, because it's only going to show up in 2. If you're trying to build a damage dealer and you need that crit damage gear for slot 4, you know it's only going to be in slot 4, right? So that's kind of everything I have for you as far as, like, again, just building you a foundation to stand on and understand what you're looking at and where to find the things that you're going to want to be looking for. Now, as far as diagnosing, like, whether or not a piece of gear is good, that gets very nuanced, because it depends on what units you have. It depends on so many different things. There's not really anything I can say to you that's like, this is good. This is how you know a piece of gear is good definitively every single time. Because you could have a slot 6 flat HP piece of gear that got a quad roll in speed. And maybe you just have a booster that you just need to go first, so that'll be good on them, where it wouldn't really be good on anyone else. So there's gonna always exceptions to every rule I would give you. So it's kind of hard to do that. But a good habit, a good thing to start looking out for, and this is the last thing I'll leave you with, because I don't want to overload you with a bunch of information, but good habits to start getting into are looking at the set and then figuring out if you think that the other stats you're seeing on it, the main stat and the substats, in any way complement the set. And for some sets, it'll be easier to do. Like the power set is an attack set. So generally speaking, if you see attack percentage in here, if you see crit damage in here, if you see crit rate in here, if you see speed in here, if you see accuracy in here, a lot of the time, those are going to be very good complementary stats for the set. So that'll bring it a little closer to being a good piece. Now, this is a power set with a resistance main stat, which is generally not going to be ideal. There may be some very niche examples where you would use something like this. For the most part, not going to be something you would want to use. However, that does not mean that it can't be a good piece of gear, right? And that's what I mean. That's where it gets hard to kind of start giving you rules of thumb, because sometimes you're going to want to keep a piece of gear because it would make for a great broken set. And what I mean by that is if we start clicking through my units, most of them are not wearing full sets. My Sorcerer is in a Swift set, but this is a broken set. My Dr. Evil has 2 completed sets, but then this is a broken set. My, Electromancer happens to be wearing 3 sets. My Dome Fighter happens to be wearing 3 sets. But most of my units are, in one way or another, in a broken set. So, the single last piece of advice that I'll give you is worry more about your stats than your sets. Again, later on, sets will become more important, but by the time you get there, like I said a minute ago about something else, by the time you get to the point where sets become very important, you will probably have learned enough to understand that sets are going to be important for whatever it is you're trying to do. So worry more about getting the stats that are going to make someone good on a unit, more so than forcing sets on. If I forced I happen to have a good Swift set for him, but like certain units, most units, if I tried to force them into a set that I thought they needed to be in, they would definitely be hurting on stats. They would definitely not be as good as they would be if I had just worried about their stats. So worry about stats over sets, okay? So we're going to wrap it up here. Again, this was just a beginner guide. It's just an intro. I will work on maybe a more in-depth guide in the future on identifying, like maybe I'll just do a video where I do a gear cleanse. It's about time for me to do a gear cleanse anyway. So maybe we'll do one long video where I'll just go through and cleanse my gear, and I'll talk through the process of how I'm identifying each piece of gear as something that I would want to keep or want to sell. And maybe that would help give you some insight into something like that. So if you would like to watch that, again, it's going to be a long video. If you're down for a long video of me doing a gear cleanse and you think it would be helpful for you, let me know in the comments, and I will do that soon. But I hope that this gives you a little bit of a foundation to stand on and makes it a little bit easier to begin the approach to looking at your gear and figuring out what's going on. And yeah, if you have any other questions or any other tips that you want to drop below, please do. And maybe in the future, I'll do a follow-up to something like this that's maybe, cover some stuff that I didn't cover thoroughly enough here. But that's it. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I'm done rambling. I do hope it was helpful. I appreciate you guys watching. Links down below for everything you could need, the tier list, my Discord, the official Discord, if you want to check any of that out. I appreciate you guys watching. I'll see you in the next one.